when I came home that night, I asked my mom, I remember saying, I am so scared of everything. I need something. And my parents were scared because they never saw me at this level of panic before. And no matter where I was, I would think, well, is this going to happen here? And so I developed panic disorder on top of my OCD, but that was really the catalyst that got me to get medication. Hello, welcome to Please Excuse My OCD. My name is Tyler Falcoa, and I am your host. If you're new here or somebody sent you this podcast, thank you for being here. If you're returning, I appreciate you. This is episode 4. I think I'm getting the hang of this. I really do. But I think I'm at that place where I have my groove, and I appreciate you showing up, sticking by, and helping me grow this podcast because I am on a mission. My mission is to talk about OCD freely, as openly as possible, so that we can break down the stigma that surrounds OCD and the incredible amount of misinformation that revolves around it. Banja is here today. I'm not sure if you can see her. I'm not going to move her. If you can see her, then that's great. If you can't, then I feel sorry for you. But she is my everything, and she has helped me through many OCD spells. Right, Banj? Yeah, Disclaimer, I am not a medical professional. I'm simply someone who has had OCD for most of his life, if not all of it. And I am here to share my experience with you. As always, if you are struggling, please seek advice from a trained medical professional. Anyways, today, what are we doing today? I've been getting quite a few messages about medication. And I wanted to just give you a background about the medication I'm on, the history of the medication I've taken, and kind of my experience with medication. This is in no way me trying to give advice on whether or not you should take medicine. Every person is different, and some things work for some people, other things work for other people. There is no one answer fixes all. But for me, I have experience in my life with medication, and I feel like me sharing that experience with you can alleviate some anxiety for you if you're taking medication, give you some clarity on some questions you might be having about whether medication is right for you or not. But I basically just want to share my experience in regards to taking medication so I can continue to keep the conversation open that revolves around taking medication and OCD. I was never medicated until the age of 19 years old. So from literal birth to the age of 19, I was just free as a bird up here, chained to my thoughts, not technically free. But all that was going on up here was just my own chemicals. That is because of 2 reasons. One, my parents and I did not understand too much about OCD. Even through therapy, even through the different things that I was dealing with, I still really did not understand what I was up against. Because as I got older, I started to experience different types of OCD, different subtypes, and different experiences that really stopped me from living my life to the point where I felt like I had no choice than to get on medication. But growing up, we didn't know anybody who was on medication in our immediate family, our friend group. Nobody really talked about that, at least in our family. You know, we come from a traditional Portuguese, Italian background, and the old school way of doing things was you hush hush and that's it. Not with this boy, okay? I am out there, but I digress. Where was I going with that? Oh, and so there wasn't so much conversation about 1, OCD, but 2, if we didn't really have any references as to reference, oh, so-and-so is on medication, this is how they deal with it. Or, oh, Janice's kids are on meds, this is how they deal with it. 1, we didn't have references. 2, my parents were scared that if I took medication at a young age, it would stunt my growth mentally or mess me up developmentally. They felt maybe my creativity would have been stunted if I took medication on some level. And there might be a little bit of a preconceived notion around anxiety medication where people think you take it and you veg out, man. There's a difference between taking something like a lorazepam that calms you down during extreme panic, or you're taking a daily SSRI to really just transmit where everything needs to go in a timely manner. So there is a little bit of that fear factor for anybody really when it comes to taking medication for the first time. If you don't know anybody who's on medication, if you're about to take medication for the first time, there's a lot of fear that surrounds that. And I'll go into detail about my experience with fear in taking medication as we go along this episode. But it is very unknown to the person who is taking it and their loved ones how it's going to affect you. So I'm going into my sophomore year of college. At this point, school started, my uncle passed away, and I was in auditions for America's Got Talent all within the same week. I had an immense amount of anxiety that time period. And I remember one day just being in class, like my body was probably on edge the whole time leading up to this, and I may not have known how to release it. So I had a panic attack in class, just randomly. I did not know how to deal with that at all. What happened after that was I developed a fear of having another panic attack. So every time I was in this class, I would think, well, am I going to have another one of those episodes? Which created more of those episodes in this class. That trickled over to other classes. Am I going to have a panic attack in this class? And so I started having panic attacks in all my classes to the point where I felt like I couldn't even be in school. This followed me home because I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what was happening. I kept feeling like this massive, like blackout almost like I was like out of my body, cold sweats, throat would close up. It's like you're fending for your life in just regular day-to-day situations. Like these are panic attacks. These are good for when you're in the jungle being followed by a saber-toothed tiger. Like that's when a panic attack is good because you get the fuck out of there. And there's nothing that your brain wants to focus on but just leaving, fight or flight, right? Not when you're in marketing, learning about how McDonald's markets in Asia. There's no need for a panic attack. Anxiety does not understand logic. So at this point, I recognized that I was having a terribly hard time dealing with regular day-to-day activities. And there was one moment in particular, Friday after school. I was getting ready to shoot a music video with my brother. And I just remember feeling so anxious, and I had already had a panic attack in school previously that day. And I was getting ready to leave, and I just got struck with such a fear of leaving the house because this had already happened to me in all the places I didn't want it to happen. And here I am about to leave the house again, and what if it happens again while I'm not here? So I didn't have any of the tools to cope with this. Having panic attacks this much, there was a lot to process. Anyways, I was afraid to leave the house. I still left the house. I went to shoot the music video. For some reason, I did really well. I don't know how I pulled it off. But this goes back to what I said in previous episodes where I would be able to have a panic attack in public and you would never know. Most people would never know. Which is sad because there's probably a lot of people who suffer in public and don't have people around that can help them or even would know how to help them if they were to ask for it. When I came home that night, I asked my mom, I remember saying, I am so scared of everything. I need something. And my parents were scared because they never saw me at this level of panic before, to the point where it was just hard to go out to eat. It was hard to do anything. And no matter where I was, I would think, well, is this going to happen here? And so I developed panic disorder on top of my OCD, but that was really the catalyst that got me to get medication. Now, I had known that I had OCD based on my separation anxiety and my intrusive thoughts about getting sick growing up and swearing and things like that. But at this point, I was having intrusive thoughts of harming myself and harming the people that I loved. For many people, they don't understand OCD in terms of like harm OCD. So when you have an intrusive thought, a person with OCD is having thoughts that go against their values. These thoughts come out of nowhere. They are strictly against what this person believes and feels and knows to be true to themselves. Your brain is going to red flag that thought and be like, Code 9, what the fuck is this doing up here? Why are you having this thought? And so you start to go down this rabbit hole. Well, what, am I having this thought because like I secretly want to do it, but I don't know? Like, and you start to ask these questions that really start to scare you. And they make you question yourself. They make you question your values. But the problem is the reaction to the thought. If you didn't care about Pop-Tarts and you had a thought of just brutally ripping a Pop-Tart in half, probably wouldn't bother you. But if you really valued Pop-Tarts and you had a Pop-Tart shrine in your room and you had a thought about brutally ripping open a Pop-Tart, you would be like, oh no, do I want to hurt Pop-Tarts? I love Pop-Tarts. I have a shrine of them. My whole life is devoted to Pop-Tarts. See, that's the thing. If you care about something, it's going to bother you when a distressing thought comes into your mind about it. If you don't care about something and a thought happens, it's probably not going to alarm you. So this is the misconception that people have surrounding OCD is these thoughts come in and they alarm the sufferer because they go against the sufferer's values. So at this point, I was having these scary, intrusive thoughts for a while. And this is before I went to a psychiatrist. I went just to my primary care physician at the time. And this was before I transitioned to my big boy doctor, okay? This was still my little boy doctor, the dude that saw me come out of my mom's stomach because I was trapped under her rib cage. That's a story for another day. This dude literally saw me come out of my mom's stomach from a nice C-section, and now he's listening to my intrusive thoughts. Weird. He knows I'm in therapy. He knows about my medical history and all that. And so he asks me what's going on. And I said, I've been having these like really bad anxiety attacks, panic attacks. I am having a hard time leaving the house without feeling extremely anxious. I am just terrified to even be here today talking to you about this because I don't know what's going to happen. And I feel like I have like thoughts that have been scaring me and also causing panic attacks too. So he looks at his paper, he looks at me and he goes, do you have thoughts of killing yourself? And I said, yes. And at that moment I was like, I'm toast. This dude's going to call the cops. He's going to get the cops down here and they're going to just fucking haul ass to the hospital and just psych eval me. And he's like, yep, just classical symptoms of OCD. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I mean, you are diagnosed with OCD. These are intrusive thoughts that your brain does not want to be having. And they're causing you intense fear. He goes, this is classic OCD. And I had not known that this was a side effect of my OCD. At this point, I'm thinking it's fear of germs, cleanliness, a lot of the same things that other people think. You know, afraid to get food poisoning, thoughts around being sick. OCD can make you feel scared of anything and everything that you value. And in that moment, I felt an insane amount of peace for just a glimpse of a moment. And I said, oh my God, I can finally label what's happening to me. Like, I'm not crazy. These are not thoughts that are brewing underneath me like some sort of maniac getting ready to pounce on the world. I'm simply suffering from something that I have been dealing with for so long, and it's presenting itself in this way now. This is where I'm getting at. He says, I'm going to try you on a medication. He started me on Paxil, paroxetine, at 19 years old. Yeah, fun. I was terrified, completely terrified, because I had so many questions and I didn't even know where to start. I did not know how to translate my fears and my questions about medication to this doctor all in that one moment. The one thing I remember asking was, do I have to take this if it doesn't work? And he said, well, it takes time to work. It could take anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks. And I'm thinking, I don't have 6 to 12 weeks to feel better. Like, I want to feel better now. He ended up prescribing some short-term, like lorazepam, which calms you down during an intense panic attack. That's the one you take and you just kind of veg out. But he started me on Paxil. The lowest dose at the time that usually they start, the baseline is around 20 milligrams. He started me on 10. So I would take 5 in the morning and 5 at night. I didn't really notice much difference until about 4 weeks in when I went up on my dose. So I went from 10 to 20. I remember waking up completely terrified. My dreams were extremely vivid. On top of, like, I am already a vivid dreamer, but my dreams were extremely vivid, like really vivid. And everything that I was dreaming in the dream felt like anxiety provoking to me. I felt like I was on the verge of a panic attack for so long when I first got on these meds. One moment in particular, I got up early to get ready because I had to drive to school on a Sunday to do accepted students days because I was working as a tour guide at Roger Williams University, where I went to college. And so I had to drive to school early so that I could be there for the new kids to come in with their parents and I could kind of show them the school and well, you're accepted, yay! Like, go through the whole shebang. And I was so scared on the drive to school. I called a friend of mine who had helped me through a lot of my anxiety before. And he was somebody that a family friend of ours that I would call, especially with medication, because I found out that he was on medication and he kind of guided me through everything. He was like my Yoda, I called him 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday and I was in tears. I am so terrified right now that I'm just going to drive off the road. And he was so calm. And he said, it's okay. He goes, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to kill yourself. You're not going to go into oncoming traffic. My symptoms of OCD were so heightened and the chemicals in my brain were still trying to balance. They were still trying to figure out what was going on because I had never taken that dosage of medicine before. That the imbalance in my brain was pretty heavy and I was having a hard time adjusting. He said, you're going to end up getting back to baseline soon. He would always say that, you're just a little bit out of balance right now. We'll get you back to baseline soon. I know this is super uncomfortable. I know you're scared. I know you feel like you're going to lose control, but your OCD is and your anxiety, they're both at really peak level right now. And if you need to take a lorazepam, take a lorazepam. I think that was the first time I took a lorazepam because I was afraid to take Paxil, which was my daily one. I was afraid to take that. So never mind taking another pill that I was supposed to take when I had bad anxiety. So I took one. I struggled through that day. My parents were a wreck at home, like really scared for me. And I remember sitting in the admissions office and I walked into my boss's office and I looked at her and I said, I need to go home. I'm on a new medication. I've never taken medicine before. I'm struggling. I don't think I can put on a face for this today. This was like a couple hours in. And so she looked at me, she got up and she said, I have medication that I'm on too. And I deal with anxiety and depression. And she shook my hand and I just felt so understood and loved in that moment. I remember it so clearly. The way she looked at me and made me feel like I was not a burden and made me feel like I was still a human being was so important to me. And I'll never forget that. And that is a big reason why I feel so much responsibility to talk about these things and share about these things without holding back, because the way that made me feel is how I want others to feel along their journey when they're struggling and they're terrified and they listen to a podcast like this, or they see a video or a clip or a quote that resonates with them from something that I said or something that I shared. That's what we should be doing. If we struggle with something and we acquired tools on how to process it and have used it in our daily lives, we should help others in their struggle, because these are very hard things to deal with. So she sent me home, and that was really the beginning of me adjusting to medication. It's such a long story. And throughout my 20s, I was on Paxil. I think I was on 40 milligrams of Paxil, which was enough to start helping with my OCD. My number one concern and symptom with Paxil was my sex drive. It was horrendous. I'm 19 years old. I'm ready to go all the time. And then, I didn't really have a hard time. Get it? I didn't really have a hard time showing up to the field, but I had a hard time getting a goal, if you know what I mean. And to be fully transparent, I didn't lose my virginity until I was 20 years old. So I don't even know what it's like to have sex without medication, which is wild. I think I've maybe told a few people this, but I don't even know what it's like to experience that. But there's a part of me that's like, I'm okay with that right now because I'd rather feel stable and good and not scared all the time. Because if you're scared, you're not going to be fucking anyway. So anyways, I got to keep that in. I was about in my mid-20s. I finally went to a psychiatrist because at this point I had my doctor filling out these prescriptions. And my therapist, I was at a new therapist in 2018, and I'm still with her now. She had suggested that I go see a psychiatrist because I was having sexual troubles. And as a guy, as a young male who never really had to worry about that, it was like a blow to my confidence. And I was always scared that I wasn't going to be able to get the goal. That's kind of a big deal, I think, for someone who is young and dating and never really experienced that kind of thing. I eventually ended up getting a psychiatrist. She was great. And so I said the main issues that I was having. And so she suggested that I start Paxil extended release. This opened up a whole other can of worms because I did this for about 4 months. I had the knowledge in my head of these side effects may take some time to get out of your system. So I wasn't a stranger to that. I had extended release, which means it gets distributed throughout your system throughout the day. Instead of all at once in your stomach, it gets distributed little by little and makes its way through. I was going to the bathroom like 3 times a day, every day for 4 months straight. I'm not going to give you too much information about this, but you can imagine like I would always get that stomach ache. They'd be like, oh, Tyler's in the bathroom again. I had to time my days around this. I knew it was coming and I was always right. Finally, after 4 months, I said, I can't do this. Like I cannot do this. I need my life back. Like I'm timing my pills because I'm like, well, if I'm out of the house by here, then maybe I'll be able to come home and shit my brains out here. That's not a way to live. Finally, she puts me on this medication called venlafaxine, which is called Effexor, the brand name. And it had quite the effect on me. I've been on Effexor since 2018, 75 milligrams. And it's much, much better. I now go every 3 months to see my psychiatrist and talk about my experience with venlafaxine, my experience in response to what's going on in my life. I have different changes throughout my life, just like anybody else. I have stressful times. I have great times. I have scary times. Sometimes you need to adjust the medication level based on what's going on in your life. Luckily for me, the 75 milligrams has been good. I know a few people who are on double that and that works for them. A lot of people don't go to medication because it's scary. When you think about taking something for your brain, it is scary. It's like, how is that going to affect me? What kind of side effects do I have to go through? The stomachs, the headaches, the sleep, the sweats, not being able to friggin' have sex. I mean, nobody wants that. But I will tell you, like at my lowest of lowest, I'm not thinking about sex. I'm thinking about how do I get out of this because I feel like shit. And most people will probably tell you the same thing who struggle with OCD and anxiety and depression, that they're not thinking about sex. They're thinking about how to feel good again. Like my story on medication is so much deeper than that, but like the basis of it and the reason why I'm on it and the trial and error of taking these various medications that I've taken, I've learned a lot. And like I said, this is not a podcast to tell people to take medicine. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just telling you my experience with it because you can learn a lot by listening to other people's experiences so that you can go in and ask the questions that need to be asked. I definitely encourage anybody who is interested in learning about these kind of things and learning about their own journey to research things. research the difference between SSRIs and SNRIs and kind of how they work in the brain and what the brain requires and how the brain works and things of that nature. I feel like I'm someone who, if I can label something, if I can take something and learn about it in words and pictures and things like that, it eases my anxiety. A lot of my anxiety, I feel like, has always stemmed from the unknown, as I'm sure most of you have the same issue. But I encourage you to learn about it and read. Ask questions if you have trusted people in your life who work in the medical field and understand these types of things. Ask them questions. This is why I do this podcast, so that I can talk through these things and hopefully inspire you to talk and ask questions. There's so much of my experience that I had to experience in regards to medication and trial and error and my body's reaction that seemed scary and were unwanted, but they really taught me how to deal with these situations and trust myself more. They taught me to advocate for myself. They taught me to continue to go on. That's important. That's so important. Your experience is validated. Your experience is unique. And whatever you get from that experience, you can share it. You can inspire. You can help others learn about what may be going on in their experience. And that's all I'm really trying to do here. Oh, I just realized that I've been sitting on my feet and my feet are numb. Oh my God. Banjo doesn't have that problem. Right, Banj? She's been here the whole time. I have not stopped and she's been here the whole time. And with that being said, I am going to be moving on to our favorite part of the podcast, which is the Q&A. So let's see who has a question. This one comes from Allie P. And she asks, if you could give one piece of advice to a young person who's just been diagnosed with OCD, what would it be? This is a great question. I would say this is something I wish I knew sooner. Every thought in the world can be had in your brain and none of it can affect you. And what I mean by that is it's never the thought. Your OCD obsessions will change a million times. Your reactions and your compulsions may be the same. So it's not the content of the thought. It really is the reaction. And why I find so much liberation in that is when you're having an OCD episode, you think that that's the worst problem in the world, the thought that you're having. If you could just fix that or find the answer to that problem, you feel like your life would be better. You'll find the answer to the problem probably, and then you'll have something else to worry about. And so the problem that you had before will mean absolutely nothing. And you're like, wait, no, this one's way worse now. It's not. The thoughts, they're just thoughts. They can have no effect on you at all if you don't allow them to. I know that it's not in your control to stop thinking. It's not in your control to keep certain thoughts out. If we can practice how we respond to our thoughts, if we can learn to accept the thought, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. It doesn't have to be comfortable. But if you can accept the thought, you realize that it's not the thought. It really has nothing to do with the thought. It has everything to do with how our brains red flag the thought as a threat. There's no power that a thought can have outside of the power you give it. This one comes from Danny T. Danny asks, how is OCD represented in media and pop culture? Do you think these representations are accurate or helpful? I think that the media does a really, at least the mainstream like Hollywood movie side of things. I haven't really seen any movie that really depicts OCD to a T. When you hear about somebody who's got OCD or you see somebody who's got OCD in a movie, they usually depict it as somebody who's like really neat. I think there was one movie, As Good as It Gets, with Jack Nicholson. And he's got OCD. And there's certain things in there that are pretty accurate where he's got to count certain things and he's got to do certain things before he leaves the house and make sure he doesn't step on cracks and things of that nature, where they kind of show the compulsion side of things instead of just like, oh, he's got all of his bottles in the fridge color coordinated and all of his utensils are perfectly stacked. Like that is where like a lot of pop culture goes. Because it's easy. It's easy to show somebody who's really neat and say they have OCD. What's hard is to show somebody who is having a distressing thought about hurting someone they love and then having a panic attack because of it and then having to touch something 10 times or else someone they love is going to die. Like, that's hard to depict a little bit. So I think maybe I don't know if it's a lack of understanding around OCD or if it's just easier to showcase somebody on screen who is just very neat. But I think OCD is a very complex situation in the brain. Thank you for that question. With that being said, thank you so much for joining me today here. And Banja, if you can see her, she's here. If you can't, your loss. Please share this podcast with someone that you think may benefit from it. Please leave a comment, a review, 5-star. We love the number 5 on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a rating and a review. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from the people who are listening. If you would like to ask a question on next week's episode, you can submit one at the website, www.pleaseexcusemyocd.com. And there's a tab there that says Ask a Question, where you can submit your question. You can be anonymous if you'd like. You can make up a name. Don't care. You have the freedom. Also, as well, you can check out our merch. I wear it in every episode because I rep myself. I should probably get Banja like a collar that says, "Please excuse my OCD." That would be kind of cool. Thank you so much. Share this with a friend. I'll see you next week.